Welcome to the editorial board. Please start by telling us your name and the office that you seek, and tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll start with the questions. So welcome. I apologize for the initial problem.
My name's Ray Netherwood. I'm the Libertarian candidate running for the vacant seat, Congressional District 19 here in Southwest Florida. I'm a second-generation Floridian, born in Tallahassee. My folks live up in Ormond Beach. My wife and I, we live down the south end of Marco Island. I grew up in Ithaca, New York, graduated from Ithaca High. I have an undergraduate in management from the University of New Hampshire. And while I was in Germany on active duty, I finished a master's in public administration with Troy State.
Is it active duty with military?
Yes, as military folks know, they usually down to the nanosecond, 20 years, 3 months, and 5 days.
So what did you do in the military?
I actually started out as a military working dog handler. I had just a little over 8 years of enlisted time and about 12 years of commission time. I was also a cost management analyst when I received my direct appointment commission. So the last 12 years I did healthcare administration.
Healthcare administration?
Yes, in clinics, hospitals, and my final active duty assignment was in Washington, D.C. at the Region 1 TRICARE office, doing all of the planning for the Northeast region for all the TRICARE beneficiaries, active duty and retired.
Is that the same as, or does it overlap with the VA?
Well, interestingly, it's tough enough to get the three services to speak to one another. The VA and the Public Health Service have always, to some degree, partnered at specific locations, but as far as a big systems approach, there has not, at least when I retired, there was not an integrated VA Public Health Service DoD function.
So the health services you're managing and talking about are for people that are still on active duty at that time?
Or retirees. TRICARE took care, it's the old Champus program. So if you were an active duty person or retiree, that took care of you. But as far as VA, someone who'd simply served for 2 years, 4 years, got out, they were VA eligible, but they're not DoD TRICARE eligible.
Does that background give you any insights and special skills on the pressing issues of the day?
I would hope that not only in terms of the Affordable Care Act and figuring out really what the primary care needs were. We took what was a relatively good healthcare system and kind of knocked it apart. We had 7 million people who needed primary care access, and instead of establishing a network, perhaps something similar to Medicaid that would in fact do that, we disemboweled what was a good, functional insurance system for many employers and for many people. So when someone said, if you like your health plan, you can keep it. If you like your doctor, you can keep it, we found out that that was a fabrication. So anytime you have a comprehensive bill in Washington, whether it's education, whether it's health care, whether it's immigration, turn 180 degrees and run as fast as you can, because you have all of these unintended consequences. So my proposal is that we can't, I don't see repealing it, because I don't think there's going to be a supermajority in the Senate of Republicans and Libertarians that could overcome an Obama veto. But we need to look at aspects of the Affordable Care Act and figure out what can work and figure out what won't work. And so my specialty, if I had one when I was on active duty, was fixing broken things. I like to go in, and if there's someone that says we've never done it before or we've always done it that way, to me that's a sterling opportunity. The VA issue I really think is shameful. Appointment scheduling and systems is something that in fact I worked on, not only while on active duty, but afterwards I was contract compliance manager for Queens Healthcare Plan in Hawaii, which was a subcontractor for managing TRICARE for all of the state. So getting physician provider networks built, figuring out what standards are for an urgent appointment, a non-urgent appointment, tertiary care things. That's all in my skill set, and I have a very good understanding of kind of what's happened at the VA And what's happened is that they've lost their focus. They no longer are abiding by what they should as government employees, not looking at party, not looking at people. The VA is way off the map in terms of the care that it's providing to veterans right now. Granted, in specific cases, you're going to find good care, and in specific cases, you're going to find lousy care. But the notion that we have tens of thousands of people who've been on waiting lists and can't get in, I think that that's kind of shameful.
Is the answer to hire more doctors and get more people seen more quickly, or is there some other efficiency that's not been found, not been used?
The answer, ironically, is kind of what Department of Defense had to do, that you didn't have the in-house capability to provide all of the care, so you in fact set up provider networks. The DoD never did it, but providing a voucher system even for a veteran to say, you can't get in here in the next 30 days for a non-urgent, let's say, optometry appointment, if that's the covered service. But since we can't get you in, here's a voucher, go find someone that you in fact can see. So that type of an option exists. I'm under the impression that that's being considered right now, but it's always been an option. And the notion that it's taken it this long to get, to recognize how broken the system is what I find alarming.
Do you still work at all?
Jeff, I have been retired for 10 years.
No.
I ride my bicycle, I swim in the Gulf, I kayak, and I was very happily retired before this wonderful opportunity came up to serve my country again.
But you seem to have enjoyed that work so much.
I did, but I also I have lived in 3 different places all at the same time, and we lead active lives. So this for me is actually a step that really pushes my life aside, and is, if I get elected, then that all changes again. But I think Washington, D.C. is in trouble, I think the nation's in trouble, and I think that I can help.
You mentioned, going back to Obamacare, you said probably can't repeal it, look at what can work, what can't work. Do you have any specific ideas as to what can work or what just absolutely won't work that you just have to jettison right away? Well,
the interesting thing is that I think we find out in our free market capitalism approach to life that when people have skin in the game, that things work much better, that you actually have an interest in in this case, healthcare, or in other cases, education, let's say. But in terms of healthcare, medical savings accounts, to me, would be a big benefit, something that, in fact, if you choose not to go into the ER because you bumped your toe, that next year you could put that into an IRA, or that if you have something saved up when you're 80 and you pass, that you can perhaps will that to children. But the notion that no one has any skin in the game kind of overloads our healthcare system. We turn emergency rooms into primary care visit facilities.
About the individual mandate, the government telling you have to buy health insurance.
Okay. Well, I'm decidedly opposed to 5-4 Supreme Court decisions. I find that anytime that happens, it's political in nature. I would love to have an amendment saying that you need 7 out of 9 yeas or there's no decision made. I personally believe that it's unconstitutional. I think that the notion that the Obama administration went in with this saying it's a fee, it's a fee, it's a fee, and 5 out of 9 saying, oh, we'll consider your fee a tax, even though your argument is it's not. I think that was a kick in the Constitution's rear end, and I think it was a kick to all Americans as well. To me, Obamacare simply isn't constitutional.
So once you take away that individual mandate, kind of the rest of the program falls apart.
Well, that's why I said initially a comprehensive anything out of D.C. is to be shunned. Because it's one thing for a state, for Florida, for New York, for California, to say we want to take on a health care issue, or for Massachusetts to say we want to take on a health care issue. It's almost like the minimum wage. What works in Florida doesn't necessarily work in Wyoming. in terms of saying you have to pay someone $10 or $15 an hour. Well, the same thing holds true for health care. And it holds true for education as well. The decisions that should be made locally by municipalities, by state governments, have been literally ripped out of their hands by this ever-growing federal bureaucracy that thinks that what happens in Washington is the word of God. I mean, it's bad news for citizens. It's bad news for the taxpayers. My goal is to try to change that. I know that 100 pounds of effort will result in an ounce of change, if lucky, but that would be my goal, is to try to get things back on track, to find like-minded folks, say Trey Gowdy. I would love to caucus with Mr. Gowdy.
You mentioned on your website, there are several issues you brought up, one of them being federal spending and the deficits, and obviously you don't feel that that's sustainable, can go on. How do we get that, how do we arrive at a balanced budget, basically?
Well, first off, like I think was Dr. Kriegel in all of our forums would say that in his time in Tallahassee, he just saw that literally half the tax dollars were wasted. I won't say that that's the case in Washington, but we are a bloated, not overworked, but overstaffed and overfunded federal government virtually across the board. And I dare say even the VA has probably got a whole bunch of inefficient things that they're doing. So continuous quality improvement, fraud, waste, and abuse, better methods, and actually holding people to what they're supposed to do. I think you can rein in agencies and their budgets. I don't see that a hatchet approach to 5% across the board cut, that's not necessarily realistic. We're an incrementally based government. We didn't get to where we are overnight, and we're not going to fix it overnight. But we have to start somewhere. So my proposal is that we have a freeze on hiring, that we in fact balance a budget, and that if we do it on the back of one department, whether it's the Department of Labor or the Department of Education, I would focus on those things which aren't enumerated, which aren't constitutional first, and give those dollars back to the states and shrink the size of the Washington footprint.
The immigration issue may always be with us. Where should we go on that?
Well, Jeff, like I said on the notion of anything comprehensive, what's floating right now in D.C. Is a comprehensive immigration bill with a granting of what you would say amnesty to people, I don't think is the thing that we need to do today.
Okay.
Because what we have is a president who chooses and picks what portions of big comprehensive laws he wants to enforce. He's not enforcing the laws that are on the books right now regarding immigration. We have a border that's a sieve. So if you don't have a border under your control, you're not a sovereign nation. The notion that we can't control what happens on our borders I find very disturbing. So to me, that would be the very first thing, is to say that we control our own borders. We don't have bus loads, train loads, plane loads of immigrants coming in under the wire, underground, above ground, but that we actually control who enters this country. And we don't have that right now. And then we also then need to turn off all of the inducements to come here. The notion that if you have an anchor baby, that you then suddenly have some type of justification to remain. We're one of the few nations in the world, I think there's only 4 or 5 left, who automatically grant citizenship based on birth. Everyone else, you go to Germany, you go to anywhere in Europe, you have to have at least one parent of that citizen, of that country, with that citizenship before your child can get it. But here in America, it's probably due to one of the early amendments after the Civil War, we're granting citizenship just by virtue of birth.
To take an amendment to undo that.
There's different schools of thought on that, but that would be the cleanest way to do it, is to repeal that.
But you know from your experience in the world of business, and you're a global kind of guy, that immigration policy affects more than the guys who pick crops and mow the yards. It can have a real impact on people who are looking to expand their businesses. And they can't find the high tech and the science people here that they need. And I can show you guys in Southwest Florida, so you don't have to go very far.
Yep.
So what do you tell those folks who would like to have a more accessible policy to the people they need to make the economy grow?
Well, there's two things. On the non-technical, non-skilled side, we need a guest worker visa program, much different from what we have today. The notion that someone comes over for 5 or 6 months, has come over illegally, works, would like to go home to their family, but can't because then they risk getting caught both leaving and entering again. If we had a guest worker program, they could come for 4 or 5 months, work, leave, be with their families, then same time next year come back and do it again. We don't have that for unskilled labor. We do have programs where if you're a person with some significant resources, you can literally buy your visa, buy your way into the U.S. So,
Well, if you invest.
if you invest. So when you have a person that owns a gas station or a motel, and you know for darn sure that they weren't born in the U.S., and have a dialect which is Middle Eastern or Indian, they have invested, they came in with $500,000, $1 million up front and essentially bought their way to citizenship, or at least to to having a business in the U.S. Now, technical folks, same thing applies. We right now have I think it's HB3 visa program for highly skilled people. If an employer can demonstrate that they have done their due diligence and canvassed and advertised and can't find the skill set that they need, then it's kind of foolhardy to not say, okay, we will grant 100 openings for engineers from somewhere to
Do we do that now?
If we do the due diligence and cannot find them, then I would say we do that now. But right now, we're not doing anything other than left-right partisan politics. No one is really coming up with a solution to say, okay, we have highly skilled folks that we need for our business. How are we going to get them here? The program exists. The program needs to be expanded. It needs to be flexible. And Washington isn't known for its flexibility.
Or it's bipartisanship?
Yes. And the interesting thing is that I don't have to reach across the aisles. Everybody else that you get in here is going to have to say, "Oh, you have to reach across."
You're in the aisle.
I straddle the aisle. It's perhaps my delusion, but that Nancy Pelosi perhaps on a social issue would come to me and say, "We can count on you, right?" And that I'm hoping that Mr. Boehner goes away and maybe Trey Gowdy would become speaker, that he would come and say, Ray, we have a vote on the budget and we want your support, and I can say, absolutely, you can depend on it. So on fiscal issues, I obviously am going to caucus with Republicans, and on more social things, lean a little more left, I would say, putting it politely.
Do you have a thought on the future of our energy policy? You overlook the Gulf of Mexico from your home, and you see the nice, beautiful waters, and maybe you think, wow, what would it be like to have an oil rig out there? And then you see the controversy we have with fracking, etc. Can you connect the dots there and what your energy policy would look like?
That's an hour's worth of discussion. First off, we need to become energy independent. We have all the raw materials within our borders to do that. One of the other places that we've lived is up in the Florida Panhandle. And when the BP spill occurred, we noticed that the migrating bird population went from steady to minimal. The irony in this is that it is environmentalists who have continued to push what were shallow wells further and further offshore. We don't want to see them, we think they're a risk to us, and then we wind up drilling in depths that we really can't respond properly to if we get into trouble. So the BP spill, my contention it was man-made, but it didn't have to happen in the first place. If the oil wells had been in 80 feet of water or 150 feet of water closer to shore, granted they're unsightly, and granted you think that there's a big risk to it, but at least it would have been manageable. And they run lines in fracking style down and out. So again, going way out, 1,000 feet out and trying to drill down, I think set up the BP disaster. We did that to ourselves. Here, everyone has their ox that they don't want gored. You have wind power up in Massachusetts and the folks that don't want to see the windmills. But if nobody's willing to do anything, then you'll never get anything done.
Yeah.
So do I want to see an oil well 1 mile off of our balcony? Not necessarily. If it's 5 miles off in water that's manageable, I don't think I would be opposed to that. We actually find that you get increased fishing and folks can go out when the big piers are in the water, the fish population increases.
How about fracking?
I don't know that the Florida topography would encourage drilling down to a shale layer. I'm not even sure what's there. What I do know is I have a sister-in-law who lives up in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, and their economy is booming. They have fracking is very much the case.
Do they
there.
really?
Absolutely. If you want to see a booming economy, go up to Northwestern.
I didn't know Williamsport had fracking.
Yes.
I mean, had oil, period.
Yeah. Fracking is going hog wild up there. Big lumbering trucks coming down the roads from all the derricks and wells and stuff. So here, to drill for oil, I think is something that should certainly be done. To frack, I don't know enough about the topography and the geostatus of whether we could even get natural gas from here. So
I guess I shouldn't be surprised at that Williamsport. I guess that's why they call it Pennzoil, right?
That and they air Lycoming engines, and they do all sorts of stuff with oil up there.
The Libertarian Party, generally speaking, and the Tea Party, is there a lot of overlap there with positions and philosophy? And if so, how do you differentiate yourself from Kirk Clausen, who is sort of sometimes called a Tea Party favorite?
Oh, well, Jeff got this in an earlier segment. The Tea Party, as it was originally envisioned, and in 2010, when it actually came into fruition, my wife and I and another couple went down to Atlanta for the very first huge Tea Party rally. Sean Hannity, I think, was one of the speakers at that. The Tea Party, and what we saw here with Mr. Cantor, the Tea Party at a local level as a grassroots function, I think is awesome. We're essentially on the same page. What I think has happened over the last 4 years is that you now have a Tea Party Express national organization that says send us money. You have the Tea Party News Network and that says send us money. So we now have these faux organizations, and the notion that the Tea Party Express has endorsed Kirk Clausen, to me, is it's meaningless, because in this Republican primary, the two candidates that were actually the closest to being a Tea Party type candidate was Dr. Kriegel. He did it years ago when probably Mr. Clausen thought the Tea Party was a little girl's game. But Michael Drycorn is even more of a Tea Party candidate. So the notion that they come in town with a bus and say, "Yay, we love Kurt," that doesn't impress me.
So why did they do that?
My hunch is, like most things in Washington, like most things around, follow the money. I haven't tried to dig into their expenses, but there's a chance that the Tea Party Express, which is its own entity, may have received something from Mr. Clausen. And even have, I think, one of our constitutional guys here, who has a radio show, got some type of a stipend from Mr. Clausen and has been his coach on the Constitution. So follow the money. Tea Party Express, I'm not going to give him a cent. I don't believe in him.
One of the constitutional guys?
Yes, he has a radio show.
Constitutional guys? What do you mean?
Constitutionally speaking.
Oh, so it isn't a constitutional officer?
No,
no. There you had my attention.
Someone who espouses knowledge of the Constitution. Yeah, is Kurt's mentor on the subject.
Okay.
Yeah. And ironically, I was at a Kelly Lichter meet and greet fundraiser and ran into both Kurt and this gentleman, and we were discussing the fact that he needed some priming on the Constitution. So I thought that was kind of funny.
What is important to your campaign that we've missed? What do you want to make sure you get to tell the folks?
What I want to tell folks is that it's time to move away from doing more of the same. If you're a Democrat because your parents were Democrats and you've always voted the Democrat ticket, that's what's gotten us into this mess. And if you're a Republican and all your neighbors are Republicans and you've always voted Republican and you see that R circle to fill in, that's an assurance for more of the same. The $17 trillion sinkhole that we have in Washington, D.C. didn't get created by libertarians. It got created by both Democrats and Republicans. So if you're happy with that, if you want more of the same, well then go ahead and do more of the same. All the Democrats can lumber in Circle D and all the Republicans can Circle R. Mm-hmm. If you want the best candidate, if you want someone that doesn't need an entourage to help them figure out what to do, if you want someone that's constitutionally focused, if you want someone who doesn't want the government to tell you what to put in your gas tank, what you can drink, what you can smoke, what you can chew, that's a libertarian. Because the Republicans and Democrats are happy to tell you all of that stuff, what to do, when to do it. So if voters want something different, then Ray Netherwood is going to offer them something different.